Hey everyone, thanks for joining another gitkraken workshop. Today we're going to talk about automating some of your workflows, particularly your pull request workflows. Today I am joined by Jeff, who heads up some of our product stuff here at gitkraken. He's going to walk very quickly through just a couple of slides just to kind of set the table on automations. And then he's going to jump into the products and kind of walk you through some of the stuff you'll see in early access for automations. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Ken. Hi, everybody. Nice of you to join us today. So I'm going to just spend a little bit of time going through some background about what we mean when we talk about automations for gitkraken. We're kind of really excited to be able to provide this sort of level of functionality to kind of remove a bunch of just tedious tasks you might be doing already with pull requests. Or even help your team with trying to identify certain use cases or risks among your PRs. So at a high level, all automations are for what we're talking about for these purposes is going to allow you to monitor PRs and trigger actions based on different things that exist on that PR. It could be labels, could be assignees, reviewers, could be code in the types of code in the change set. And it's an if this then that or Zapier style framework for your pull requests, which can really help optimize and be more efficient around the review process or just even the workflows around pull requests that you and your team might already have. The first installment of this change, as you know, gitkraken, a few months ago, we did acquire some of the features from CodeC. CodeC has a bunch of really useful dev functionality. And we're excited that this is the first one we're kind of pushing out along with code maps coming in early Q1 or mid Q1. And so, if you are familiar with CodeC and what their automations framework was, it's going to be a very close mapping to that kind of lift and shift thing we did. So for the initial release, it is going to be GitHub only. We do plan to extend this functionality for automations out to other providers. But for the early access, especially, and the initial sort of V1 preview release, we are going to be focused on GitHub workflows and pull request workflows as well. So with that, you can just jump to the next slide. I'll give a little bit of background on how we think these automation workflows can help. This is going to provide a few different general aids in terms of the PR workflow. So one, there's this idea of code ownership for you and your team, right? You have people who are more familiar with the code base or who are responsible for particular areas of the code base. And GitHub does have, like the code ownership files you can embed in your repos in order to help solve some of that. What these automations will do is give you a little bit more flexibility and control based on some additional, more granular rules you can provide around them. So not just file path or file name or file type. You can extend that to actually have some conditional logic involved. You can monitor properties of the PR outside of that, like labels or assignees, or even go so far as to, check the actual code itself and trigger those automations based on the change set of that PR. In addition to that, a lot of these automations can help if your team is concerned about smaller, less complex PRs. This can provide some sort of, buffers or boundaries around pull requests by monitoring them for size or complexity. It can help remind your team to sort of maintain or review those best practices that you've established. Whether you have new team members coming into a repo or new developers onboarding into a team, a lot of times those best practices can be unknown or forgotten. And, some of these automations can help remind people to maintain those things in their pull request workflow. And then the last two, it's really about improving visibility of changes that could impact the code base stability or areas of the code that maybe are higher risk than others. We can help provide those types of visibility gains on the pull request itself to get more people involved, either adding another reviewer, adding a label, that kind of thing. And then lastly, when PRs do get sort of forgotten or ignored, automations could help with, monitoring the inactivity of the PR to help either nudge or bump people in order to, either reassign that to a different reviewer or flag it for the team so that they can, have a conversation about it and decide if that just needs to get closed and repicked up later or marked as a draft so it's not kind of cluttering up the queue anymore. This is all kind of really just helpful stuff. And then it is worth mentioning too, some of these use cases are going to come. That one particularly is going to come shortly after initial release. So I won't expect the stale PR monitoring to be there, but we are going to have most of some of these other capabilities for the early release. So with that, I don't know if there's any questions you want to get involved with. Let me know, Ken. Just feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I can get into sharing my screen and giving a quick demo.
Yeah, we'll do. Nothing yet. So let's go ahead and jump into the demo.
Alrighty. Okay, so when you access gitkraken.dev, which is where we will reveal and have the automations UI available, as I mentioned, the initial release is going to be GitHub only. You'll see a screen like this, and you'll be required to connect your GitHub account. You'll select repositories that you want to run automations against, and then you'll be prompted to go ahead and create your automations. I'm not going to go through that onboarding flow here, but in general, those are the three sort of requirements that you will need in order to run automations. And anybody in your Gitkraken org, if you are in a multi-seat org, can create the automations, and those automations will benefit you and your team as long as they are part of the pull requests and the repos that you're creating those automations against. So that's going to be super useful and helpful for anybody to just benefit from this. At least during early access, it's going to be kind of totally open, no gates, and we just, we want to get people to sort of start adopting and using this feature to help benefit your workflows. So after you do go through that onboarding flow, you can see I've got a bunch of automations here that I've sort of preceded to help provide some quick examples, and I'll walk through a couple of them to kind of show off like just what the type of behavior you can expect are. So some of the use cases I mentioned, right, we have a bunch of automations, and I'll kind of filter this out to show only the ones that we do have enabled at the moment. Your automations list, we have some automations around providing best practices for the team. I mentioned some common workflows that can be used to help improve like the stability, the code, the testing. And so if you go ahead and create your automation, or I'll go ahead and edit this one, this is where you will be able to create the automation that can help your team deliver some of the best practices in your PR workflow. So as I mentioned, you give this automation a title. You can decide whether you want this to apply to draft PRs or not. Typically, you might not want that to happen, but if you ever do, obviously it can happen there. And you choose the repository that automation will run against. And then here's where we can get into some of those conditions that you want to trigger against for the automation. And in this case, for the best practices, right, we're going to go ahead and run it on any PR because, we don't want any PR to kind of go through the pipeline without having to remind people what to do. So we can go ahead and just choose any of these particular conditions. Number of files changed is greater than 0. Really, there should not be a PR without less than 1 file changed or modified. So this is going to run on every PR for our team. And we're going to go ahead and create one of those checklists that GitHub has, right? And that checklist can be used to help remind people to link our Jira issue to the pull request. These are going to be posted as a comment in GitHub and the markdown checklist format. So the author of this PR is going to have to go through each one of these and, self-declare, yes, I've linked to the Jira issue, or they at least have to explain why they're not going to, right? We can link and remind people to follow coding standards or guidelines that the team has, update relevant documentation, test and build locally before, having to assign the PR or add the reviewer. And then, even go as far as reminding for unit tests. So this is just a very simple little reminder checklist that can be customized to anything you want with your team. And when that automation does run, you'll go ahead and see that in your pull request workflow. And I'll kind of show an example here right now. This PR was kind of created, and you can see when the PR was created, it posted this comment, which, the user then has to go through and check the boxes and say, yeah, I've done all of these things and actually haven't done it, but For the sake of this demo, I think we'll go through and do that. In addition, and one thing I'll note here as an example, we are posting another comment, and that automation is related around code monitoring. So in this particular case, we have an anti-pattern code check for that pull request, and in that, we're checking a couple of common sort of anti-patterns that the team might not want to introduce to the code base, right? This type of function for setting inner HTML can introduce, some XSS vulnerabilities. So we don't really want to have that involved. So this automation is kind of looking at the code in the change set and scanning it for any of these, changes that we don't want there. And even if you can, this one is also checking for accidentally introducing an environment file, which you typically don't want to do on the repo. And we post this PR to come here. The entire team will see that comment. And if they're part of your gitkraken org, they can come here and see, okay, well, yeah, this is an anti-pattern that my team doesn't want to do. I can go ahead and reformat that or restructure that without even having to have a reviewer come and flag it for anybody. It's just all going to happen automatically for the author to get notified pretty quickly. And so, yeah, as you can see, that's kind of there, and anybody can go view it. On top of that, I'll go through a couple more here. One thing that's kind of important is obviously code flow ownership and visibility. And, in this case, some useful automation properties have been set up to look for sensitive areas of the code that are important, right? In this web app, our authentication, this is a folder in our app. This is another folder in our app for checking out in our e-commerce site. I'm going to try to open up VS Code just a minute for showing what that looks like. But you can see, we have our checkout folder, we have our auth folder. Changing things in here could have really negative downstream effects. We really don't want to, we want to have an extra layer of visibility involved when things in here change, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and, push this change that we had for updating our checkout flow in gitkraken. And when we go ahead and do that, I'm going to make the PR really quickly in GitHub to kind of show how the automation will get triggered. If I go back here, we're going to choose our update branch. There we go. So this was a PR I created before. I'm just going to go ahead and reopen it. And you can see how the PR will get triggered. And in this case, yeah, it's inheriting our automated checklist that we had before. So the best practices are being enforced. It's being flagged for potential risk. And in this case, because it is affecting auth and checkout, right? I'm giving it a label automatically for being a part of one of our critical flows for our app. This is going to help, the team when they're looking at the PRs and the list, see that label and sort of have a better visibility flag against it. And I'm going to go ahead and assign Juan because he's typically working in those areas for these particular changes, right? So Juan should be an assignee. I could set him as a reviewer or an assignee. You can see here, I can even add an optional message to kind of indicate to Juan what this automation is for, why it's there. So this is just really, really just kind of helpful for surfacing that visibility, giving a little bit more granular control over code ownership, and helping the team kind of just be more aware of these kind of risky changes. These automations do run, like I mentioned, they run automatically when a PR is reopened, when a PR is opened. Certain types of updates will trigger this automation. I will say we're still trying to maybe figure out the most optimal ones. Do we want it to run on every single PR update? Not too sure yet, but it is going to run at least on open, reopen, label updates, I think, when it's marked ready for review, and a couple of other ones, which we will link to in documentation when this does go out. But so yeah, really, really, really kind of cool feature for your PR workflow optimization. Have a couple of other ones in here. Like I mentioned, we can check for risk based on number of file changes and things that are available. The initial conditions here, we're going to check against some of the more common things, very basic file name, file path, file edit, and folder. These do allow you to do glob matching on the file names, so you can have some sort of wildcards involved and things like that to help you a little more flexible. Looking at the diff in the code, is there new code introduced or old code or any code? And then we are going to have reviewer and assignee as options for this section as well. But right now, we're just showing you, we can base it off of the author of the PR, if there's a particular label involved, or if there's a certain amount of files changed. And as I mentioned, there are going to be other granular conditions included, things like number of comments potentially. If when a comment's posted, if it goes beyond a certain threshold, that could be a good risk identifier for a team. And you'll be able to manage this however you and your team want. So with that said, the only other thing worth mentioning is within automations in gkdev, they are based off of a specific repository. And so you'll be able to manage what those repos are, add or remove them if you want to introduce more repositories for your org, and run automations against those. And that's kind of our quick introduction. If you are interested, we are planning to provide early access to this on gitkraken.dev. If you do go to automations today, you can sign up for early access. We're hoping to release this pretty quickly. Could be as soon as tomorrow. But if you just want to fill out this form, if you haven't done so, you'll get added to that list. And when we do send that email out with early access, log into your Gitkraken account, you'll be able to come in here and start playing with the automations feature and giving us some hopefully helpful feedback of how you and your team are using it. So super excited. And yeah, thanks.
So Jeff, just a couple of quick questions. So one is, I know you mentioned to start, it's going to be GitHub only that is supported. Do we have any other plans on like which other providers or timing on that we can share?
Yeah, so I will say that it is going to be as soon as possible after early release. It is kind of already been decided we are going to try to support GitLab, Bitbucket, and Azure. That's kind of core 4 that we do today. So any of the providers that Gitkraken client supports today, or that we have in our integrations area, those will be supported for automations. I think it's worth mentioning, when you are setting up automations for your team, you do need to have permission to create webhooks, because that's really just how we're kind of checking this. So when you choose the repositories, you'll only be able to choose repositories that you have permission to create webhooks against. So as long as that's there, you'll have no problem.
Somewhat related question, if you can see this on the screen, Jeff.
Yeah, can a VM apply the same automation to all, or with the manually create automation for each repository? Yes. So day one, you will have to create an automation for a repo, but that is also on the near-term roadmap, where you might have an automation that you want to apply to many repos, which is going to be another GitHub differentiator, because that's kind of how you might have to set that up today with different GitHub actions. So it is a benefit, right? This is going to avoid your minutes or your time for running GitHub actions. You can offload some of that stuff here. And we are planning to provide multi-repo automation runs, whether that's across repos in a workspace, or it just across, like the 3 repos that you and your team might use. There's a little bit of nuance there. And so I'd love to talk more about that. But yeah, good question.
And then we have one about security testing. So this is, I imagine, more of future plans. But for the code analysis example you gave before, we were looking at text, right? Do we have plans to do anything more sophisticated than that?
Yes. So what we're looking ahead against is not only triggering specific like comments to the pull request. We have a bunch of different things we want to trigger, right? One being any change that happens on the repo would be a useful trigger in this case, because might not be changes in the PR, could be changes just in branches being pushed if your team's not using PRs. And then outside of like code analysis in the condition, or when you're trying to match against that code, we do want to trigger the ability to tie in other services or integrations, right? So if you do have a static code analysis tool, what we can do is if the automation does detect some type of thing in the PR, and I think GitHub does this anyway to a degree with actions, but yeah, we want to provide pathways to trigger some of those like jobs from a static code analysis standpoint. Maybe there's a custom test suite or a custom scan that you want to run only if certain things happen, instead of just trying on every PR. Can kind of help you manage and organize those pipelines a little bit easier. But yeah, at the moment, it is going to only trigger around some simple text matching within the change set. But ideally, yeah, we'll provide more advanced features there. So good call out.
Couple of other quick ones. People are looking for, is there any documentation basically to see what they can do with automations, actions, and all that prior to them getting access to it, so they can start to think about it?
So today on gitkraken, you won't, but if you do go to CodeC's website and go to their automations feature and their docs, you can read, and essentially everything that they list there is going to be supported for us day one. But again, everything extra that we're layering in is going to be part of the gitkraken docs, and that would be coming out within the next couple of weeks on our help center. So we can make sure to include links to the help center before with the early access email.
And then there's a question, do paid accounts need to register for early access, or will they receive it automatically upon release? I think the answer there is, if you want to get early access to it, submit that form that Jeff put up on the screen and is linked here on the slide we're showing. But when we go beyond early access and it's generally available, everyone that has access to gitkraken.dev will be able to use it, right, Jeff?
Yeah, so for early access, do sign up on GK.dev, like Ken was saying. And then once we come out of early access, ideally a week or so after, that's get thrown out there, it will be in public preview. So anybody with a Gitkraken account will be able to use it regardless. So if you want to wait, you can wait and everybody will just get access. But if you want to start playing with this in the next week, then yeah, sign up on gk.dev.
Great. I think we made it through everything. Thank you, Jeff, for your time. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And one more time, to stay in the know on automations, use that URL there, fill it out. Once we're ready to go and give you access, we'll reach out to you and give you all the info you need.
Yeah. Real quick, that last comment, if you click, there should be a stay informed button. And if you click that, it should open up a sign up form for you on GK.dev. So just to kind of note that last question there for, I think it was Simon.
Yeah, Simon, if try like disabling your ad blocker or a different browser if you're clicking that and not seeing a spot to enter your email address. We'll also, if anyone that attended this, we'll make sure that you guys are included in that early access list as well. So make sure you're taken care of.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day and hope to see you on the next one. Take care.
Absolutely.